Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Broken Arrow and the kind of changes that I think developers should make in order to improve the multiplayer experience. They have talked about the surrender option, they have talked about a penalty for leavers in the game. Sure, that's all well and good, but I think they should be willing to go further in order to improve the experience. So first off, let's talk about the leaver situation. While it's good to add the penalty to people who leave, I think there are more things that the developers could do. Some games that I personally play have a draw option. So basically you start a match, and since most people that leave, a lot of people that leave at the moment in Broken Arrow at the very least, they're disconnecting and they're trying to get into a match, or their game is crashing on a loading screen. So just having a draw option would be great. Some games can also have a draw option which allows one specific team, or the team that has lost people, to be able to just draw the match on their own. Now, of course, there's a whole discussion on what the option would be the best on this subject, but I just think some kind of draw option would be good, because it's not really great to start a match and then lose elo points because your team disconnected. Maybe it would be a thing to be said that you shouldn't lose elo points and it shouldn't be counted as a loss if, 4 people in your team disconnected before the match even really began, or shortly after the match began. That is a different discussion, because I think that just creates bad a bad situation in terms of multiplayer rankings where they're not really matching reality, especially in a game like this where you do have multiple people on each team. But specifics of that, there's all kinds of ways to view it. Other games, what they do with respect to this is if teams are not even, and in a game like this, having losing a single player is pretty important. But some games, what they do is when they detect that teams are not even, they'll just automatically end the match. Like if you start a match and teams aren't even, it will automatically end the match very, very quickly. And that's maybe something that the developers could look at. Again, there's different options on this particular subject, different ways of approaching the situation. And I'm not necessarily advocating for one or another, but I do think something like this would be good one way or another, regardless of that. But then there's more. We gotta talk about what it means to actually play a match without an even number of players on a team, because it's all based on battle groups. And while you do gain more points, provided someone leaves, what you're not gaining is troops. So you may end up in a situation, especially if you've built your deck on the assumption that, other people are going to be able to make up for some of your shortcomings. But even if you built your deck on the idea that you have a bit of everything, it won't be enough, because you won't have the number of planes, you won't have the number of air defenses, and just end up getting annihilated by an opponent. So trying to play with a lesser number of players is just a significant disadvantage. You can still win in some situations, but I think that just because one person disconnected, it shouldn't be like, okay, we've lost this match. That should not be how that's handled. So what I think the developers should look at is how they handle unit respawn. So when you lose a unit, it gets put on a cooldown. So you get more points when people leave. But beyond getting more points or point generation, maybe we could talk about refreshing units. Or we could talk about giving people some units that other people had in their decks. Not sure how they would handle that, but, imagine if you could bring jet fighters, not just from your own deck, but also from an allied deck. So yes, you would have a larger number of planes, but that would be the only kind of thing you could do in order to contest the skies. Though granted, that would be more important if you're basically left on your own, or 2v5, that kind of situation. And there's all kinds of discussions on how far the developers should be willing to go with regards to this. But I do think just reducing the cooldown that it takes for your troops to regenerate once you lose them, provided you've lost people on your team, would be a good starting point from my perspective on that subject. And third, what I think the developers should absolutely do, regardless of how one might feel about everything I've said so far, but the one thing I believe that the developers should do with regards to ranked matches at the very least, and you should have more options right there. Like, if you want to have just quick match for the casual players, okay. But for ranked matches, my perspective is they should take a page or the whole damn book from what Microsoft's been doing with Age of Empires and Age of Mythology. Because people do have all kinds of different machines, but if you want to play ranked in Age of Empires 2 or in Age of Mythology, then you have a benchmark, and you have to reach a certain score in that benchmark in order to be able to play ranked play. This is one of the great things that Microsoft has done with those games, and one of the reasons those games are doing so well from a multiplayer perspective is, like, every person that's playing that, like, you know, they have a good enough computer. We could also talk about connectivity testing on that subject, so people with bad connections, yeah, they should not be put in a situation where they're just going to, you know, people who are prone to disconnecting shouldn't be put in a situation where, you know, they're going to screw over an entire team because of their poor connection. Also, we could talk about, like, how maybe there is a value proposition in ensuring that people on the same team have similar pings. So you do have that kind of affair. So you're not seeing people across the world. Like, I've played with Koreans in this game, and it's like, obviously the ping in that situation is going to be awful. The connectivity issues are going to be real just because of the distance involved. So there is that factor to also take into consideration with regards to how the developers should handle. But yeah, I believe that a benchmark should be added in the game, and I believe that people should reach a certain benchmark score, similar, again, to how Age of Empires does it, to be able to play ranked play. So games with Elo, all that kind of stuff, you know, what people do on their own or, you know, in custom games, all that, doesn't matter. But if you're talking about Elo plays, then I do believe that it does matter that people have a certain score, you know, and they might be forced to lower their settings. They might be, and if they're constantly getting crashes, and again, that should be something that does factor in that from my view. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Those are my thoughts on this particular subject. But again, these are just some perspectives on it I have on this. But I do think that it's not going to be enough what they're looking to do, and I think they should go further. But I've just expressed how I would, some of the things I would look to do, but there's all kinds of different options available on the subject, of course, from all kinds of different competitive games, but these are just the things that stand out to me, so the kind of solutions that do stand out to me. Costin signing out, and stay tuned for more.